Hi, Sandeep. Can you hear me?
Hi, Dheeraj. Yeah, I was able to hear you.
I'm here now. Sorry about the delay.
Perfect. Perfect. And okay, great. Great. All right. All right. So great. Wonderful to have you here, Dheeraj. This is just great. And I'll just get started.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm actually beginning to learn with these kind of panels and webinars. So looking forward to all the questions and showing how little I know, and then how much there's so much more to learn. So thank you, Sandeep, for really organizing this, and appreciate everybody's curiosity.
Wonderful. Cool. Let's get started. And yeah, so hello, everyone. Today we have an amazing guest. We will be learning a lot about entrepreneurship as well as AI-centric software product design. Welcome to a talk by Dheeraj. Dheeraj is a successful entrepreneur. He built Nutanix and took it public in 7 years. And it was the largest tech IPO of 2016. Over the course of those 11 years, they brought in around $7+ billion in software revenue and almost 1.7 billion annually over 20,000 customers. Now he is building another great startup called DevRev. You can see the logo. Yeah. So Dheeraj, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you, Sandeep. Yeah, I mean, the first 10 years of my career were after college, really working and learning, building code, building teams around those who build code or write code. And in 2009, right in the midst of the great financial crisis, there was this itch. So with two of my friends, I figured, we're going to really go and answer this itch. And that itch was to start our own company. Before that, I had worked a lot around data. So data management, file systems, databases, clustered databases, data warehouses, clustered data warehouses. And there was a theme to my 10 years, first year and a half for really learning about how do you really apply object-oriented thinking to business software, which was Trilogy software, which is a really good place to learn about C++ and Java, and many of the things that still haven't, reduced in relevance, like workflow engines and things like that.
Yeah.
But then I moved to building file servers, clustered file servers using commodity hardware and pure software. Then I moved to building databases, learning about the core foundation of what a transaction means, atomicity and consistency and isolation and durability, and storage for databases and indexes for databases and things like that. And then I moved to building clustered data warehouses using commodity hardware. This is before the world of cloud, and still using cloud-like architectures of commodity servers and distributed systems and such. And finally, using a lot of this to build a distributed data center, which is basically what Nutanix came to become. The idea that you just all you have is a set of homogeneous servers, commodity servers, and all your data center services are in pure software. Not just all of storage, but all of compute and all of file servers, all of network switches, load balancers. Everything became pure software eventually.
Yeah.
So we were the sort of torchbearers of taking what VMware had done in the decade before us, which was really virtualizing compute and making it pure software, to taking basically this approach to every other element of the data center. People gave it a word. The word was called hyper-converged infrastructure, because it was converging everything into servers. Very
Right.
similar to what Apple had done with our personal lives, where everything was a gadget and a widget and physical hardware. And then with iOS and Android, what you saw was a convergence of our lives. So I think Nutanix really took me from being a developer who used to, I was not the fastest coder, but I was a very thoughtful coder, and I would test a lot, to becoming somebody who was a good people person who also respected design and architecture. So I never forgot design and architecture. Even when I started doing Nutanix, I learned a lot about design and architecture of a business beyond just design and architecture of software as well. But we were pretty fast. Fastest to a billion in that decade, faster than anybody else. And at the same time, there was a design and architecture that was probably thrust upon us after we went public, which was the idea of subscription and subscription models, and what it means to be truly portable, multi-cloud, and so on. So in 2016-17, we really took upon a journey of business transformation and a business model change, going from hardware to software, software to subscription, subscription to annual contract values. So I learned a lot about many of these things after we went public, and many of these things were not easy, because you had to change the wings of a plane at 35,000 feet and learn about every little thing of efficiency and what it means to really think about the cost of doing business, and cost of sales and cost of marketing and things like that. So learned a lot in those 11 plus years. And I think there was a spark that came in 2020 during COVID, when I figured, there's so much that's being digitized and will probably end up becoming truly invisible. Nutanix was known as invisible infrastructure, but it was still on-prem. So you still had to buy hardware, and you still had to put people to really stitch it all together. So we had done really well in terms of making things invisible on-prem, but a lot of things were actually moving off-prem to the world of public cloud. And that was very intriguing to me. So that was basically the start of DevRev.
Wow. Wow. So you really have been the torchbearer for this entire revolution that we have seen in past. And yes.
A small player, I would say that, I learned a lot from others. Our team was really good. We had grown up to 6,500, 7,000 people in 60 countries. We were selling to 150 countries. We had customers in 150 countries. So there was a lot to learn about distribution as well. And I think the idea of DevRev was really about taking this customer love, which we were very much loved by our customers. We had a net promoter score of 90 plus for 7+ years. And every year we thought we're going to acquire more customers. We might actually have issues in retention. And we didn't. It was quite contrarian. And a lot of it was to do with the culture. We were very humble in front of our customers. And it was not easy to support them, especially because we had like almost 30,000 sites with 20,000 customers. And we had to ship code and upgrade code. And we had all sorts of complexity. There was combinatorics of hardware and different kinds of hardware that we used to run on and things like that. So there was a lot to learn. And I basically cut my teeth just learning about customers and all that. But we also had a very customer-centric culture. We were very real-time on Slack with our customers. And we had to hack our way into Slack for real-time collaboration with our customers. And developers loved it. They knew what empathy meant when it came to being on Slack in real time, when an incident had happened. And people really appreciated that. Customers appreciated it too, that look, we care, that to put them in real time with our developers and product managers, not just with support people. We also didn't use a support tool. So we didn't have off-the-shelf, best-of-breed support software that we had used. We had built our own from scratch. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that nothing good existed back in 2011,
Yeah.
And now when I look at it, I feel like nothing good exists today even. I mean, we've done an okay job of ticketing, and we're doing an okay job of conversations, but there's a lot that needs to be done there. So the idea of DevRev is to really, think about, bringing a lot of disparate pieces of business software together, not the least of which is customer support and product management. These two things really need to come together. And the name DevRev, Dev is really the developer, the product manager, even the support staff, the dev. And the Rev is, really a personification of their customers, So what does it mean to really bring them together, bring them, in real time, not just chat with them, but also really figure out what's important and what's not. And also do this with immense amounts of AI. So the name of the company is DevRev.ai. And our goal is to truly AI-fy growth and customer success for our customers, which, people have thrown department names behind this. So there's a growth department and there is a customer success department. But, at the end of it all, a lot of it has to do with AI-fying and making it into a culture. What does it mean to make growth a culture? What does it mean to make customer success a culture? So that departments that have existed for the last 30, 40 years, customer support and product management, can truly deliver purpose.
Right. That's deep. That's deep. Yes. All right. So you are an inspiration to many, including myself. And yeah. So my question is, what does platforming or replatforming mean? And how does it relate to this topic at hand today?
Well, thank you for also being an inspiration. I think, every tech lead, every architect, every developer, every designer, every product manager, I get to learn a lot from as well. I mean, if anything, to me, we're talking about AI for the last couple of years now, and more so in the last 6 months or maybe 4 months with chat and so on. But if you go back to 1995, 1994, internet was the big revolution. Right? Internet was what AI is right now. And I think the best entrepreneurs were those who went to the basics of the internet, who learned everything about, HTTP and TCP/IP and browsers and HTML and so on and so forth. And of course, there's a lot that actually got done in those first 10 years, even though the bubble burst and everybody thought the internet is actually going to die with it, but it didn't. And those who persisted did an amazing job of building great businesses, e-commerce businesses and beyond as well. And eventually, internet also came to B2B. It was initially a B2C revolution and then came to B2B. And I feel like there were companies that were legacy that were left behind. Like even the mainframe was left behind after the era of internet. The big Unix servers, which were kind of the underbelly of B2B, doing payroll and ERP, were left behind. And then what you saw was the emergence of, I would say, internet-based business software, starting with CRM. CRM was the first one that said, look, we can really do this remotely. You don't have to really host software. And that started in the late 90s and went on, has continued to go on till now. But, Salesforce went and really defined this with APIs and, they built their own cloud when there was no public cloud as well, with Oracle and Java and virtual machines and things like. Actually, back then, there's probably not even virtual machines, physical machines, And then every 10 years, things had to be done differently. Where we are right now, I feel like it's no different than what mainframes were, in 1990s. They just couldn't be redone and rewritten for the new internet. Same thing was true for the big Unix vendors, so what emerged was something that was replatformed, had to be rethought with Linux and Java and open source and things like that. And then new companies emerged. I mean, in the world of SaaS, they came and said, look, the way to deliver business software is actually through something that's invisible, that's something that's all available through a browser, and something that's available over HTML and HTTP. I think that was a revolution of its kind in the noughties, in the 2000s. And I feel like in the 2010s, things remained somewhat stagnant, but now all of a sudden you realize that things are being redone again. I mean, and even the old companies that have been around for 20 years, they're forking their code for cloud. Forget about AI. I'm just talking about public cloud itself. Salesforce has a different stack for AWS and emerging economies and things like that. Atlassian had to redo their stack for the public cloud because it was different than the on-prem stack they had. So there's two code bases. SAP had to do this with their public cloud multi-tenant stack and so on, and Oracle had to do it. Everybody had to go re-platform to be ready for the public cloud.
Yeah.
And I feel like AI is that fork in the road as well. We cannot retrofit AI into existing things. You really have to think about this as something that's native, organic, foundational, needs an empty canvas thinking. And that's the thing that excites me the most, that if you have an empty canvas of a foundation, a platform, a piece of software that was thought through with AI in mind, I think the next decade is going to be really exciting.
Well, perfect. So there's a question from audience. The question is, what prompted you to introduce HCI against conversational hypervisor?
Great question. I mean, the word HCI definitely was not our word. The market had given a word to us. Just like smartphone was something that Apple wouldn't have come with. A smartphone was kind of a name that was thrust upon them. I'm pretty sure the purists at Apple squirmed at the word smartphone, because it was really a computer in your pocket as opposed to just a phone. But it is what it is. I think you live by the neighborhood. So we live by the hyper-converged infrastructure neighborhood. But I think the question was like, what really gave birth to the idea of HCI? I would say that complexity of everything around, because we had created a lot of different departments, storage departments, networking departments, compute departments, virtualization departments, application departments, security departments, lots and lots and lots of teams that basically were specialists. And all of a sudden, here comes AWS and says, look, we can do all of that in a VPC, and boom, I can sell it to a developer. I don't even have to sell it to a server team or a storage team or a networking team or a security team and so on. And I think in many ways, HCI was that. It's like, look, can we deliver simplicity to the folks who actually own applications? Because they're the ones who are struggling with trying to stitch together everything, bring people in a room, really understand how much is it, what does it mean to size, capacity of compute and storage and networks and things like that. And that has been sort of the core of everything that has happened in IT. Like we go ahead and start with all these elements, which are departments and teams and different business software and different systems. And then there's an immense opportunity to integrate it, which basically is what DevRev is doing. We have all these departments now. There's a department that does software development, the department that does cloud operations and incident management, the department that does customer support and ticketing, and there's a department or two or three that does growth and sales and marketing. And none of them actually have a real central view of the product to the end user. And in many ways, we are hyper-converging business infrastructure with the product and end user being at the center of this. Because nobody can complain like, hey, why are you converging me around product and end user? Like, well, what else matters? Nothing else matters. Your work, your issue, your incident, your ticket, your opportunity, your campaign is worthless if you don't understand the end users and listen to them and figure out what they use and what they don't use, which is the product itself. So I think what we saw in the world of IT infrastructure or infrastructure as a service was massive convergence consolidation. We feel like that's going to happen in the world of business infrastructure as well. Many of these things will need to come around, the end user being the center of the attention for every department, and the product being the center of attention for every department as well.
Okay. So there's a comment by Ganesh that you have got an amazing view in the background.
Well, I think, there's a lot that I learned from our customers or prospects, and the market is large. I feel like the more things change, the more they remain the same. There's a lot to learn from Apple, by the way, in our daily lives. When I talk about the word hyperconvergence, this is how our daily lives were. We used to have a phone, and we used to have obviously televisions and laptops and music players and systems that would do like maps and so on and so forth, and how everything just converged into a computer that can be carried inside a pocket. I feel like we need some of that in our businesses too, because again, my sort of takeaway from Nutanix was that we spent a ton of money. Like, we were spending $1 billion annually on sales and marketing to get $1 billion, $6 billion, $7 billion every year, spending probably more than 100 million on support itself, and
Yep.
a lot of these things actually can be done more efficiently,
Yep.
And did that with, obviously, with sales incentives and things around annual contract value. What do you pay for and who do you pay for? Do you have a separate department for retention and renewals versus sales and acquisition and hunting and so on? But I think there's a lot more to this in the coming couple of decades. There's immense opportunity to really AI-fy. I mean, we use the word AI-fy growth and customer success.
So what you're saying is that, so are you saying that the ones who survive and thrive in this AI revolution are those that fundamentally rewrote their software? Like, when you say platforming or replatforming, do they have to write it from scratch? And what about the experiences of their past two decades of building software? Doesn't that count?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, if you take a step back and think about everything around us, like just our universe, physics was still important 4 or 5 billion years ago when life emerged from something. So physics and chemistry were important when biology really happened. And to me, the first decade of SaaS was physics. Like, okay, we moved it from this location to that location. That's physics, We use APIs to actually do things, HTTP, HTML browsers, all this stuff. That to me was physics. I think we started looking at data warehousing as a big problem for SaaS in the last 5-7 years. And that is chemistry. How do you really start to do analysis, and workflow engines became the core of things. That to me is chemistry. And now with AI, you'll see a lot of biology emerge as well. But the core pieces of physics and chemistry are still very important. Biology sits in the foundation of physics and chemistry and so on. So the idea of an object model, for example, and the idea of how do you really look at your business transactions, your customers, your product, your end users, your work, like your issues and tickets and all this stuff, they're all business transactions that you need to model. And then you need to make it highly customizable, because that also is a hard problem. In the enterprise, you have to really make for a customizable object model. You have to build a really good workflow engine. Again, things that we've talked about for the last 20 years. And then go build on top of it. Like data warehousing is very important as well, because if you don't collect data, don't have a data pipeline, and you're able to put that in a massive lake that's growing every day, and you don't know how to organize all that into a data warehousing model, a star schema or whatever that you use, then AI can't work on top of it because AI needs a foundation as well, and some new things have emerged. Obviously the idea of language and natural language is actually something new. We used to depend on people to do sentiment analysis, and we used to listen to call center voice and things like that. So some of those things will change. The modalities will probably move from voice to text. You will not use a support manager's ear to say what was the sentiment of this call. You'd rather use machines to do this. So there's new foundations that are going to be built around semantic search and AI models that are available through API calls to OpenAI or whatever to do things like sentiment analysis and such. But at the core of it, I think the physics and the chemistry of business software will need to remain there. And I mean, I can tell you that when you go to the enterprise, when people say, how do I put my own model? You'll have to give them a great workflow engine so that they can go and automate the heck out of it as well, So the physics and the chemistry of business software still remains. There's still hard problems. And you need to make them cloud native too. I mean, I look at SaaS from 20 years ago. They didn't have the luxury of public cloud. So they built monolithic systems. I mean, Salesforce is a monolithic system. It's the opposite of microservice-based architecture. And if anything, for many of those companies, microservice to them is an acquisition. It's like a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of microservice. And the place where they integrate all those microservices is in sales incentives and sales compensation. Like, hey, you go sell this product and that product and that product. That is integration. But it leaves a lot to be desired for the end users to really go stitch it all together and say what really matters. I think if anything in the new world with truly cloud native things, when microservices available in the public cloud, I mean, even integration, for that matter, has to be native, data warehousing has to be native. Many of these things have to be left shifted so that we engineers can deliver something that's highly integrated and just delightful in experience as well.
Perfect. So wonderful. One of the questions is that what is the next frontier in networking and cybersecurity? How can AI aid in this new frontier?
The biggest challenge with there's probably 3,000 to 4,000 security startups out there. The biggest challenge in security is no different than the biggest challenge that we see in many other departments, many other realms of infrastructure, IT in general. It's just false positives. There's a lot of false positives to deal with. And we created, obviously, a lot of rule-based devices. If anything, firewalls were rule-based, and then over time, people said, hey, can we do better than rules? And I think there's probably some models that crept in 10 years ago with IPS, IDS systems. I think where it goes from here, because each log line, each entry that's an anomaly that's detected by a networking device is actually an English language sentence. And the question is, how do you feed it to a really large language model? And what do you really use the new AI for to reduce the number of false positives and false negatives? I think that'll be a journey of this coming decade and more as well. And how do you do it efficiently? Because at the end of the day, we're doing a lot of this stuff in the public cloud, but there's a cost of doing all this too. And if you gave it to a Borg, like this massively large model, you give it a sequence of let's say events, and it needs to come out saying, is this a malware? Is it a spyware? Is it something that is an intrusion? I think it has to be done highly efficiently as well. Now, in the past, we have used ASICs and FPGAs. The question is, how much of this do you throw to a bunch of GPUs in a server farm for it to come back in near real time? Because in the past, we also try to do these things offline because of false positives, people never really deployed these in real time, in line with the network packet, because for one, it had false positives, and secondly, it was not that fast. So, I mean, the coming couple of decades, I feel like as the intruders and the bad actors actually get smarter, so will this new generation of AI thinking as well.
Right. Probably imagine that given a script and tagging the threat level of it, we can just feed it to say LLM and then ask it today. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, and look, the challenge will be how do you economize it? How do you make it cheap enough? How do you make it real time for it to be inline versus out of line?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think, even like sequestering a packet and trying to blow it up in a little Lambda function will be new. I mean, if you go back in time, like 10 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
companies like FireEye came and say, hey, I can sequester a packet and really open it up in a virtual machine.
Yeah.
That became like a big thing, and then Palo Alto went and built on top of it. But, in the world of cloud native, I think you'll see modern techniques of doing this too.
There are a couple of more questions by the audience. Let me just read it out. A question from AK is, what is the future of Nutanix and how will Nutanix look like after 5 years? I would like to add to it. I think I would ask like, what's the future of DevRev and how will DevRev look after 5 years? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are very loaded questions. I
Okay.
continue to be probably the largest individual, shareholder at Nutanix. So I really follow it and I learn from it. There's been a great transformation in the last 5 years. It took 5 years to change the wings of a plane at 35,000 feet. And honestly, it's never been done in the history of IT that you change that business model dramatically to a point where it looks like such a modern company, all in the eye of a public market. It wasn't easy. Everybody said go private, and we've come out of this. I'm grateful and just indebted to everybody there, including Rajiv and Rukmini and David Sangster and everybody else who actually is running the show there as well. I feel like the world of multi-cloud is upon Nutanix. But I also feel like, the idea of multi-cloud will not just be about running software physically in the public cloud. It also is about commerce. Like, how do you go and really dip into the marketplace of AWS and run on-prem software using AWS commits? You don't have to actually, create new budget for on-prem software at all. And those things will actually matter. In fact, we are kind of entering this era of deglobalization. The last 2 years has been, seeing a lot of that. So data residency and some of these things around GDPR and all that will actually make clouds smaller. That will miniaturize clouds. And I think Nutanix has a huge role to play. I think if there's one product that failed in AWS was Outpost. Amazon just didn't know how to ship code. Nutanix really knows how to ship code to 30, 40, 50,000 sites. So I think in this yin yang of what you need to ship and what you need to run at a customer side, in a factory floor, in a shop floor, in warehouses and things like that, Nutanix can be the king of that. And doing it in the most efficient subscription consumption way is the way of the future of that company itself. In many ways, DevRev's future is very similar. I think we have to miniaturize the cloud. I mean, if anything, the incumbent, even the companies that call themselves SaaS, I mean, I look at them as companies that did things in their on-prem cloud. I mean, I'm deliberately using the word on-prem cloud because it was their private data centers. I mean, Salesforces of the world didn't build this in the public cloud. And I feel like, what we saw with Oracle and Oracle developers, like, hey, I mean, PL SQL, you got to run a proprietary language to run Oracle, use Oracle, customize Oracle. A lot of those things are true for the legacy SaaS vendors. You have to learn a custom language to go and customize and run workflows and do automation and write plugins and things of that nature. I think cloud native basically is a level playing field. All of a sudden, we have to say, let's go after every developer and their favorite language to really customize and program our platform and things like that. So we got to miniaturize, you got to make things cloud native, we got to really sit as close to the brain of the future, which is the AI models, as possible. And that really is about AWS, GCP, and Azure. And in there, I think there'll be horses for courses. I mean, we are doing all our transactional stuff in AWS. We're going to do a lot of our data warehousing in GCP, and hopefully, if things go right, we're going to do all our model training in Azure. And I think the future of DevRev is when we can really go and burn the AWS commits of our customers, saying, hey, you don't have to carve a new budget for DevRev. You already have AWS commits. Use your AWS commits to buy DevRev. And same thing with GCP commits and Azure commits. How can we actually use these things so that our customers don't have to come up with burning new dollars when they don't have to,
Perfect. Perfect. There's a question from Pranay. What is the most intriguing application of AI have you seen till date? Okay, so
I'll be biased. Because what I have seen from Adobe with generative AI has been precious.
I see.
And it's beautiful, but it's also ethical, and it's also something that will be responsible in the way of generating images, but also understanding how to give credit to the people on whose stock images these things were trained. I think Adobe is a beautiful company, and I feel like the images, the generative stuff that will come out of that company could be huge for the rest of the world. And at the same time, going and paying back to the people from whom these models were trained and inspired from.
Yeah.
I feel like, the human mind, I mean, I'm a very visual thinker. The human mind is pleased by all things visual.
Yeah.
Images will play a big role. If anything, I feel like we have to go play a big role, not just in text, generating release notes and knowledge base articles and feeding it to the semantic search engine to go and make sure that we can do amazing deflection of chats and things like that. But images play a big role as well. I mean, I feel like generating images for release notes and delivering it to the customer's chatbot will be immensely unique ways to go and engage users. I mean, users actually like engagement, which is visual. I mean, I love the way Discord's release notes come out. They're so consumer grade and so playful. And I think there's a lot of role of playful stuff with images to be had with generative AI in this new world as well.
But I would say this. Okay, I've seen like lots of application. My personal opinion is that probably the most intriguing is ChatGPT till date. Okay.
I think you're right. I mean, honestly, we all love, this idea of reasoning, and there's a bot that's reasoning a lot. Now, we know that it's not really reasoning. I mean, you and I, we recently read this Noam Chomsky's article in the New York Times.
Yeah.
That's very telling. I mean, it's a very contrarian view. I mean, coming from a lifelong linguist who's also a philosopher, like, no, the human mind, maybe you want to read that section of how the human brain thinks. I think it's very intriguing.
Okay. I'll let me just read it for everyone. So there is this contrarian view by Noam Chomsky in recent New York Times article, and it says that the human mind is not like ChatGPT and its ilk, a lumbering statistical engine for pattern matching, gorging on hundreds of terabytes of data and extrapolating the most likely conversational response or most probable answer to scientific question. But ChatGPT and similar programs are, by design, unlimited in what they can learn, which is to say, memorize. They're incapable of distinguishing the possible from impossible. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we are barely scratching the surface of this. I feel like what we knew about, let's say, the internet back in 95, now it's laughable, like how little we knew about the internet back then. I mean, the dial-up modems and the early browsers and the early, programming languages in the browser and all that stuff. I think we've come a long way in these 25 years of the internet. I feel like we are in that 1995 era of what this AI thing will look like. I mean, we talk about this, all our
Yeah.
developers, we're going to sit and talk. You
Yeah.
remember, how does the human mind think? I mean, do we generate every word, after a sequence of words like the way we do with Chat GPT, or would we first do a recall of a fact and
Mm.
then put grammar around it? And that recall is a foundational data structure in our SaaS, like, semantic search engines, very important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
And then the question is a large language model the best way? I mean, we have been trying to figure out, as you were saying, how do you really link objects, from conversations to tickets, tickets to issues, issues to enhancements, enhancements to release notes? A lot of these things actually can probably be done better if you chain the large language model
Yeah.
upstream to downstream things that are a little bit more basic, like SVM or linear regression and things like that. So
Yeah.
we feel like we'll have to really juxtapose these things next to each other. Really, I use the word horses for courses. At the end of the day, you have to use the right model for the right job.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is, how do you really look at precision? I mean, I look at these conversational AI companies the last 5-7 years. There was no AI in them. It was just rule engines. They were rule
Exactly.
engines. They were actually built to say, if you see this, then you see these words. And if you see those, you see, go do these, ask these questions, and so on and so forth. And that was like the basics of ontology in language modeling 40 years ago or something. It's like a flat two-dimensional structure where you define a rule engine. I think the true chatbots of the future will actually be model-based, and we have to really go and learn about not just large language models, but also simple things like semantic search and SVM and other statistical and traditional machine learning
Yes.
techniques to really go and bind things, classify things, communicate to end users just as much.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so these are like okay. There are quite an interesting question. There's a question from Vilex. Thanks for the data warehouse shout out, Dheeraj. Could you elaborate more on how you think companies should be using the data warehouse to support AI/ML efforts? Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I feel like it's a foundation of modeling. If you need a place where you organize information, because at the end of the day, numbers have to be organized and they have to relate back to other numbers. And at the end of the day, I mean, I look at the most core foundation of any SaaS software is the word change. The word change is a very powerful word. I mean, at the end of the day, every event is a change in some sense, and people have actually used change data capture to really capture any and every kind of change, and a line of comment in a ticket is a change, and a change to metadata of an issue or a customer record is also a change. How do you capture all these changes? And we've done that with fact tables, which are sitting as big, monstrous tables in a data warehouse, And now the question is, how do you really go and analyze, summarize, aggregate, roll up, organize all this stuff, eventually to come up with summaries and conclusions,
Yeah.
So I think we need to really think about what's happening in terms of change, and where do you store the change, and how do you really go and roll up and aggregate and summarize all these changes,
Yeah.
and bring it back to records like people and product parts and features and APIs and GitHub transactions and code commits and customer tickets and customer conversations. These are the stable objects, which are few in number. You probably, because the human mind cannot deal with billions of tickets and billions of conversations. So there's a few tens of thousands of customers. There's probably a few million conversations, probably tens of thousands of tickets and issues. So you need to bring all these summaries back to these low cardinality records, because then you can go report it, visualize it, analyze it, drill down on these things, and so on. And I think that's why data warehousing continues to play a big foundational role in all of this. Now, in the past, we left it to the human to go do what if analysis and drill downs and things like that. But I think in the new world, we can actually leave it to the machine to also come back with correlations and causations and patterns and anomalies and things of that nature, where machine learning can play a huge role.
Yeah.
Without really having a human to go and debug stuff, what's happening with the data itself. There's another big piece that's happening with analytics now, which is I'm very passionate about, is the role of managers to become data sort of wizards, because in the past they left it to the data analyst saying, hey, I don't know SQL, you go and figure it out for me, so then there were companies like data visualization companies that would go and just run it with data analysts. Now in the world of SaaS, I think it's a massive opportunity to really go and say, we can throw natural language at a manager and they can write in English, and that can translate to SQL, and that SQL actually runs against the data warehouse itself. So I think SaaS, the bar is higher now for what analytics means, and how do you need to really use natural language to go and bring back insights into what's happening in their overall business.
Exactly. Wonderful. So, okay. So this, though I had this question myself, there's a question by Navneet. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are just starting out in the tech industry, and what lessons have you learned throughout your career that have been most valuable to you? I had this question to ask, but Navneet has asked this now. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a great question, Navneet. It's definitely, and the biggest one to me is, how do you learn with the market? How do you learn with your people? How do you continue to learn and not think that you know everything? There's a book that I'm reading right now, which actually is a good read. It's called Both/and Thinking. I'm a big believer in paradoxes. It's like when you're starting a business or running a business, building a business, or growing a business, you really are a tightrope walker. In many ways, you're trying to balance two sides of the same thing, and you cannot overdo any one side because you fall. And I think everything in life around us is really a paradox. I mean, even something as simple as water is a great friend in a desert, and it can be a great enemy as it is in California right now. So everything, needs to be balanced. Like these days, we think about acquisition of customers, and I'm like, okay, you have to worry about retention just as much, because it's too expensive to acquire new customers. So the ones you've acquired, you need to retain them, and it's really important to balance acquisition and retention. Feature driven versus value driven. Like, what does it mean to just keep building features in a product versus going and talking about the value creation, which is the outcome for the end user, being market centric versus customer centric, because you have to think about all these tens of thousands of potential customers you need to go and serve versus this one customer that you really need to go and solve for. This is a paradox. Product led versus sales led. What does it mean to do this digitally with human assist versus doing it with people and digital assist? These two are paradoxes. You got to go and balance them. AI versus design. If you have arrogant bots, the humans are going to fail it. You're not going to get the real value of AI, because these AI recommendations were failed by the human. So you need to really figure out how do you balance design with AI. Even things like convertible note versus the valued round. I'm like, you got to do both, and maybe every year you can actually build a convertible note and then go and value it eventually when you go and value the round. And you can do this pretty much throughout your private company journey. flexibility versus conviction. You might think that you need to pivot a little bit, but you also need to have enough conviction on the why and the how of things, even though the what might or the when might be worth tinkering and negotiating in the market. So I feel like, the biggest lesson that I've learned is that you walk a tightrope when you're building a business. And when you wake up every day, you have to say, today I'm unhappy, but tomorrow I'll be happy. And how do I not ride the highs and lows of one side or the other? Because, you lose time, you lose relationships, you lose the joy of really building something. So just think about the average line. The average line is where you stand, and these two sides are just two ends of the same tightrope, and hopefully, and at a metaphysical level, I feel like breathing more, sleeping more, and smiling more are the ways in which you can really stay sane, because there's so much change that's upon us that without breathing well and sleeping more and smiling more, it just make it harder on yourself and your family members and everybody else too.
I see. So that was very, very deep answer. And yes, I'm going to remember this. Okay, so it's a fine balance, and you have to stay sane while doing all of that. Okay. All right.
Well, thank you. I know that we have kept the audience in here for almost 50 plus minutes. It takes a lot to be attentive and have an attention span of 50 minutes. I think the most important thing is how all these events force me to learn. I mean, from people like you, Sandeep, I ask basic questions that are probably sometimes very dumb as well. But to me, in this world of AI and all things business, nothing is a dumb question.
Nothing is a dumb question. Like I ask this all the time, right? And it's essentially like when people are like say I ask people simple question like how do you define intelligence? And this sounds like a very simple question to people upfront. There it's a dumb question, but it's not a dumb question. Like there's no such thing called a dumb question. It's only the person who doesn't understand it. I remember in this one talk I was there, and one person asked me that, hey, how do you trust AI? Right? Until I realized, it took me a while to realize the essence of question. And I couldn't answer that question in that public event. So I wrote back to him, and I also wrote in on a forum detailing like, how do you trust AI? Because it sounded like a dumb question, but it was not. It was not. It was probably.
Yeah, I mean, these are fundamental questions too. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's like human trust. I go back to Deepak Malhotra.
Yeah.
In many ways, we are negotiating with the machine now. We are in this phase of negotiation with the machine. And like all things negotiation, trust is built a little thing at a time. Every day you do CI/CD. I mean, honestly, we didn't talk a lot about MLOps and things like that, but every day we have to get better trusting our own algorithms, and then finally going and building trust with our recommendations and getting the reinforcement back from our end users and such. There's no shortcut to this. We have to, as James Clear would say, we have to get 1% better. And if we can get 1% better every week, I think we have a chance as well. So.
Okay. So there's a question on quantum machine learning. I will park it aside, though it's an interesting question, but.
Well, I don't know enough about it, but I think I'd love to get that question on LinkedIn or some such place, and we can answer that. And maybe we can do this offline too.
Yeah. There's a question from Navneet. Ethics and transparency are increasingly important consideration in AI development. How does your company ensure the AI technology developed are used ethically and responsibly? I think
design will play a big role in this. There's another word that lawyers use called provenance. Provenance is knowing the roots of where the inspiration came from for the machine. It's going to come down to those things: citations and provenance and confidentiality, and also humility of the bot. I mean, I mentioned this, at the end of the day, if the bot hallucinates, which we've known for bots to hallucinate. in business software, you could go to jail for wrong stuff, I mean, so
Right.
we have to do it in a way that's responsible from that point of view as well. And you come up with accuracy scores and confidence scores and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But I agree with the question. I think it's a very important one. At the same time, this was true of the internet too. I mean, people complain about security. Like, well, security actually takes care of itself when you actually open it up. And not to say that we have solved security in the world of public internet and public cloud and so on. But I think ethics and delight will actually have to take care of each other over time. It's not like, hey, I know AI is delivering all this delight and intelligence, but what about ethics? I think both have to go hand in hand, and companies that only do one and not the other will probably fall by the side. So I think it is yet another paradox that needs to be considered.
So there's a question from YouTube channel. One of my teammates has posted. Question is, how is DevRev leveraging the GPT?
Well, I think it starts with customer interactions. At the end of the day, the role of call centers will change. The role of voice will change, and you probably will have less voice and more text, and more async and less sync. So we have a very modern chatbot that can actually be embedded with 7 lines of code into our developers app, and it's a place where you actually access your record, obviously the old style record, which is my tickets and my information and my customer and my profile and so on and so forth, but also is a place where you ask questions and you get answers in real time. And that real time is not a human sitting on the other side, but really is based on this vast trove of database that we're building with every interaction, every change, every new ticket, every new conversation is actually adding to this trove of the database. We are using GPT to actually, encode all this into numbers, into vectors. And then we're going and matching all this with the nearest fact that we retrieve from the database. And then eventually using generative again to go give back the answer as if there was a human agent on the other side itself. So I think chat is a big one. Clustering a lot of similar things like tickets and issues and enhancements and things of that nature, very important. If anything, it's about making managers and developers 10 to 100x more productive. Any triage session between customer support and product management, if it took 1,000 hours, our goal is to make it into an hour. If we can do that, that would be a great place to be. So let's see whether machines can help. I think we're probably taking 1,000 hours to 100 hours now. And the question is, can we take 100 to 50 and 50 to 30 and so on?
Okay. Great. These are interesting questions. So can artificial superintelligence pose an ethical dilemma in the future if countries and companies are unable to control the flow of AI learning? I think, yeah, I would park it aside because it has been,
Well, honestly, I'm not educated enough to answer it, to the point that, I related back to the ethics question in the past. We have to take both together and really think hard about, let's start with attributing and citing the stuff that the machine actually has gained inspiration from. And if we can start from there, then we'll probably, and then let's go ask for humility, like saying, hey, did I get this right? And if the human reinforces, these are good places to start with.
Okay, they're quite.
We're at the top of the hour. So
Yeah.
what we could do, Sandeep, is that we could take
so many questions.
We could take these as Quora questions, and let's go and answer them offline as well. I think I want to make sure that we are mindful of people's time too. But let's take some of these as Quora questions and go and answer them offline as well. And honestly, I'd love to get some, really good feedback from not just you, but the rest of the team that is actively reading and learning about all things, AI these days.
Okay. I would love to answer these questions. So, okay, so I think, So I think since we are towards the end, though I had many questions to ask,
Well, I mean, and there's never enough. And at the same time, this doesn't mean that this is the last one. I think let's come back in 3 months and do another one, and
Yeah,
maybe show some of our own things. Maybe get some of these people involved in a hackathon. Because there's a lot that's coming in terms of a hackathon as well.
yeah.
And learn with the community. I think there's nothing better than crowdsourcing intelligence with the community itself. I mean, sum of the parts is actually one thing, but the whole is bigger than some of the parts.
Yeah, if it's multiplication.
Good. Well, thank you everyone for really doing this.
Did you have did you have anything to else to add other than my questions and audience question, something from your side? Message
let's continue to learn. Let's make sure that we don't forget about design when we do AI.
Okay.
The two sides of the same coin in many ways. Let's make these bots not just beautiful and pretty to look at, but also things that are deeper in the way. I mean, I hear about things about deflection rates of 3%. I'm like, oh gosh, how do we really take it to something that's meaningfully good? So let's make them meaningfully good beyond just the froth. And let's also realize that we know very little. So every year we'll know more, and learning with the rest of the community is the only way we can build an honest company here.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dheeraj, to taking out the time. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot being, an entrepreneur in past. Your advices are, always very valuable. And I look forward to these kind of sessions in future again, probably 3 months down the line. And everyone, I'm extremely sorry to have skipped your questions. I'll take out these questions after this event and probably put it out and in the public, as well as the video will be uploaded on the at a public place, and we'll be sharing the link to you. And so with that, we can, all right, say thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Awesome. Let's transform ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Okay, perfect. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.